Greetings, citizens of Nindie Nation, and thanks for tuning in to the Nindie Nation podcast, your weekly dose of everything independently developed for the Nintendo Switch. I'm Jeff, and today on episode 45, we'll take a look at all of the new Nindies releasing on the eShop for the week running November 8th through November 14th, 2019. After that, we'll check out the best deals for Nindies this week that you can't afford to miss. But don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Nindie Nation, because over the past couple of weeks, publishers like Devolver and Team 17 have dropped some major deals that were too short-lived to cover on the podcast, but I promise to always keep you updated on the big deals worth your digital dollars. Besides Twitter, you can also find Nindie Nation on Facebook, YouTube, where you can listen to this podcast alongside game footage, and thenintendovillage.com. But we'll talk about all of that later because we've got a lot to get into this week. It's a good thing, then, that since last week's episode, only 2 games have snuck onto the eShop, and as usual, that's where we'll kick things off. These are the games that you've missed since last week's Nindie Nation. Delta Squad was released last week by Radalaika and Esquema Games for $5.99 and looks like a generic twin-stick shooter I find myself playing through every few months. And I mean that in a good way. Stuff like Neon Chrome, Judge, and others I just love to blow through every once in a while. And I have a code for this one, so I'll give it a whirl this week and report back. Twister Road is the perfect 99-cent game that unfortunately launches for $4.99 by Digital Game Group and Dispatch Games. You're in control of a ball going down a randomly generated tunnel that requires you to move left and right and see how far you can make it before falling. I'm sure we'll see this one on sale for mere pennies before too long, and that's when I'll take one for the team and let you know if it's worth your time. But that's it for the games that we missed this past week. I'd like to pat myself on the back, but I just think fewer games are releasing right now because everyone tries to get out of the way of Call of Duty every year. Unless, of course, you're Twister Road, and that's, just an unstoppable force if I've ever seen one. But let's get right into this week's new releases because there are 26 new indie games releasing from the wonderful to the dreadful, I guess. And starting on November 8th, kicking off your day of Friday releases, is new Super Lucky's Tale, which makes its way to the Switch thanks to Microsoft letting their incubated indie studio, Playful, share the love. This is kind of a technical but Playful developed Super Lucky's Tale on their own, and then Microsoft bought it, so I'm gonna call it a Nindie. I'm also making sure we cover it because I love this game. New Super Lucky's Tale is charming, adorable, and it plays great. No, it isn't going to reach the heights of Super Mario Odyssey, but I'd like to say that it sits right alongside all of the other 3D action platformer games where you're exploring big worlds, finding collectibles, and watching a story unravel as you progress through this beautiful, colorful living world. New Super Lucky's Tale is also a great game to play with kids, although it can get a little tough at times, and it's also $40, which I do think is justified, but is understandably a little expensive in the grand scheme of Nindies. Right now, I think the best games you could check out in this genre are A Hat in Time or Super Lucky's Tale, and especially with A Hat in Time selling for $30, I'm gonna say start there, but if you just can't get enough throwback 3D mascot platforming, or you're looking for something that's a little bit more laid back, you can't go wrong with new Super Lucky's Tale. Stormwind EX is easily the best pick we've had in a while for a side-scrolling shmup. If you love any of the classic titles like Gradius or R-Type, Stormwind EX is graphically similar, but with a modern polish. And it even includes the drones you can attach to your ship for extra power, like those other classics. I like that the game includes 2 modes, one that lets you save and reconfigure your ship between each level, and another that just gives you basically a handful of lives and a slap on the butt as you play old school and see how far you can go. It has achievements, leaderboards, and all that stuff that you'd expect, and for $12.99, this new to the Switch developer Be Alive looks to have a classic shmup in the making. When I saw the code and PR announcement come through for a $5 game called Football Game, I knew it wasn't going to be a sports game, especially since I have yet to see anything resembling a sports title come out of Ratalaika. What I have seen, though, is 80s or 90s throwback point-and-click adventure games, and that's exactly what we've got with Football Game. You follow Tommy on his way to meet his high school girlfriend in Normal Town, USA after their football game. And when she is nowhere to be found, you and your new friend Tommy will have to point and click your way through a story full of twists and turns to figure out what happened to his girlfriend at the football game. And back-to-back with Ratalaika games as usual, we get another solid release this week by Dragius Games, with a very unique puzzle platformer called One Person Story that gets exceptionally high recommendation from me because it's only $1.50. First of all, this game has a great serene soundtrack. It's very, very relaxing. At first, One Person Story looks like a generic minimalistic puzzle platformer where you're just getting this little stick figure from one side of the room to the other, and ostensibly it is. However, the presentation includes a bunch of little motivational quotes that end up telling a story that actually does a decent job of making you think about your own life very introspectively. You mix in the pleasing but simple graphics and the serene soundtrack, and I actually found myself just kind of chilling out, reflecting on my day, and just getting lost in thought instead of really paying attention to the game. But after the couple of times I played it, I honestly was really relaxed. I'm not sure if this is as much of a game as it is just a little meditative thing, and I don't know if anyone else will experience it the same way I did, but for $1.50, One Person Story really earns its keep and is one of, if not maybe my favorite title from Dragius Games so far. Wrecked! High-octane stunts crashes its way onto the eShop for $5.99, and it is seriously tugging on my nostalgia strings because it brings back all kinds of vibes from the stunt mode back in San Francisco Rush. Wrecked is developed by Little Chicken Game Company, winning this week's Best Studio Name award, and is brought to us by Cubic Games, who continues to bring surprisingly solid titles at decent prices. Wrecked features multiplayer, a bunch of stuff to unlock, and all the ramps you could need across 3 arenas to help you pull off some sick air. Cue the guitar riff. And if you're looking for sick 3D ball physics, why, House of Golf could be the game for you. It's a clever mini golf game where the mini is taken literally. The 135 levels are set across places like a bedroom, a barn, a kitchen floor, and other places where you might see a kid set up like a Hot Wheels track. Launching from Atomicon on sale for $7.49, House of Golf looks like a fun time with ridiculous levels, multiplayer, and all of the quote-unquote 3D ball physics you can handle. I have to give Radoslav Felik and Ultimate Games some credit here, as their $8 Souls-like 2D platformer Blindy claims the simple design is just because the lights are out and the game is in the dark, but I really think they might have just decided they didn't want to make backgrounds and used it as an excuse. Blindy is an 8-bit platformer that looks super hard, and with such a simple style, it doesn't really do much, however, to stand out among others in the genre. And the sole title releasing on November 11th is The Mim's Beginning by Squatting Penguins, also published by Ultimate Games. And I don't know, maybe Squatting Penguins wins this week's Best Studio Name award. We've got some good ones this week, another one to come, that's for sure. Launching for $8.99, The Mim's Beginning is a simulation strategy game from a godlike perspective, similar to Black and White or even The Sims, but on a cosmic level, as you bring creatures from their roots to becoming an actual civilization with technology and powers, and then you battle enemies, wage war, and try to capture as much land as possible. And then the next day, on November 12th, Yaga smashes his way onto the eShop for $20 by way of Romanian developer Breadcrumbs Interactive. And this game looks fun, creative, and very interesting. An action RPG with world-building mechanics built around Slavic folklore, this game has a hand-drawn storybook art style and a catchy soundtrack that makes it feel almost like a Supergiant game. I'm specifically thinking of Bastion, and I'm really feeling Yaga, the role-playing folktale. Zen Chess Collection drops for 75% off at the low price of 99 cents and is an extremely bare-bones chess game brought to us by Qbyte Interactive. Published by Toplitz Productions, Mad Games Tycoon puts you in the shoes of a game development studio head and gives you all the tools you need to build your very own game studio as you work to take on the gaming industry. The game itself looks decent, but there's a lot of stuff on Switch that already kind of fits this mold, and it makes their asking price of $40 way out of the league where I can recommend it. Based on the comic book series by Robert Kirkman, Thief of Thieves Season 1 contains 4 episodic adventure games following a cat burglar using stealth and social engineering to pull off high-profile heists from around the world in a hand-drawn comic book art style that looks great on the Switch and almost exactly like the acclaimed comic book series. Adventure game fans take note. Thief of Thieves is one worth checking out for $19.99. Draw Chili is an arcade action game with some light tower defense elements in a heavy metal purgatory between our world and the dark afterlife of hell. Build up your city in purgatory and ward off those who should be sent to the afterlife one level at a time as you battle alongside the Horsemen of the Apocalypse in Hype Train Digital's $10 game full of action, heavy metal, and hell. This game looks to get about as chaotic as possible, and it looks like a lot of fun. Moving in the complete opposite direction, Bee Simulator by Big Ben Interactive has you flying around a world inspired by Central Park through the eyes of a bee, where you will collect pollen, race fellow bees, and defy dangerous wasps. The scenery and scale are quite impressive, but I was really taken down a notch when I saw the $40 price tag, because that leaves a bit to be desired. Will you shell out your cash and fend off the humans? Or will you pollinate your bank account a little bit more and wait until the price is right to save your queen? Well, I'd say wait. Puzzle fans might not want to wait on our next game, though. For $10, a newcomer approaches by Web Farbrohr, which kind of sounds like something you would say to an Uber driver after leaving a night at the bar. The game, though, Hole Down, is a really cool concept where you have a series of blobs with numbers on them, kind of looking like a falling block puzzle game, and you must funnel essentially a stream of bouncing balls to reduce the number on all of the blobs with the limited amount of balls that you have. It's pretty hard to define, but I would think fans of Breakout or Peggle would get a kick out of this game. Check out the video of Hole Down on this week's episode over on YouTube to see why I think Hole Down looks like a lot of fun. And another contender for Best Indie Studio Name, Giant Margarita, brings a more physics-based puzzle game to the eShop for $11.25 that reminds me a lot of World of Goo or even Lemmings. You need to get all your little blob characters from one side of the level to the other while navigating various physics challenges and leveraging available power-ups. This is just another great game to consider and what is shaping up to be one of our best weeks of releases yet. And keeping that train going, we've got 10 titles launching on November 14th to round out the week, starting with Rocket Wars by Rooftop Panda for $9.99. This is a fun take on asteroids or a twin-stick space shooter with a simple retro aesthetic that puts you in the middle of a 4-way battle with your friends or computer opponents, of course. It has 6 game modes, 12 different ships, and multiplayer including both co-op or player versus player. I'm putting this one on my wish list because if it plays and feels as good as it looks like it might, Rocket Wars could be a great multiplayer game to keep on hand. Perils of Baking is a hilarious-looking pixel art 2D platformer by East Asia Soft, developed by Lilymo Games for $4, and could be a pretty good addition to your library if you're willing to take a chance on a classic 2D action platformer, where you, the baker, must navigate a world of toasters and pancakes and a kitchen's worth of evil baking supplies in order to save the world from your brother, who is another baker and has given in to a dark artifact, whatever that means. And for $14.99, you can get your hands on Scarlet Mysteries: Cursed Child, a point-and-click adventure that I can only describe as looking the exact same as every other game released by Artifacts Moondie. I'm not sold on these, but I'm sure there's someone out there who loves these classic Myst-like point-and-click adventures. They're basically just a bunch of reading and looking for things to click on screen, and there's another one now. And this week's Nindie Nation Trifecta winner is by Orange Cube, and it is Labyrinth of the Witch, a dungeon-crawling RPG where you take control of one of 4 characters sent to navigate randomly generated dungeons in roguelike fashion with RPG mechanics. I really like the colorful pixel art that creates a style reminding me of the great 16 or 32-bit JRPGs I grew up loving. I'm not so sure if this is my pick for a game to take a chance on, but I'm always in the mood for games like this, and Labyrinth of the Witch looks like a great next endeavor for $15 that I plan to check out for myself. Launching for $8 and looking like a traditional 2D platforming adventure, I really like the premise of Balthazar's Dream by Dolores Entertainment. As a boy named Dustin sleeps in a coma after an accident of some sort, his dog Balthazar sleeps by his side, and in the dog's own dream state, he believes he has found the being that plans to take Dustin, the boy, away. So in this cute pixel art platformer, you play as the dog in his dream on a quest to save his best friend's life. And if that doesn't warm your heart, I don't know what will. I do, however, question why among the list of features in this game's description, one of them is launch your dog into space, but I'll leave that for us to discover on our own time. Sudoku Relax 3 Autumn Leaves is a bunch of Sudoku by a developer called Gmode for $4.50. Some Distant Memory is a hand-drawn visual novel with light exploration about an archaeological professor exploring the ruins of a 300 years past apocalypse alongside an AI robot who can create visions to help the professor unravel what took place in the days before the end of the world. It's a cool idea that reminds me a lot of Return of Obra Dinn, but the visuals look much more colorful and very beautiful. I can't tell if it's developed by a group called Undefined or if that was maybe a gap missed in the website's release schedule, but Some Distant Memory looks like a unique story probably worth exploring for $12.99. And here we go. Publisher 4 Megabytes or 4MB Interactive brings our cheap game worth taking a chance on this week, in my opinion, with Galactic Defense Squadron. Developed in Unreal Engine 4, this fast-paced, endless twin-stick shooter in space will have you tackling endless waves of enemies while you upgrade your ship to progress as far as you can. While the game looks very simple, I mentioned the utilization of Unreal Engine 4 because it lets this team add some really cool color and neon effects and lighting stuff that really bring the game to life. And if you're listening to this, I'm probably already playing it because I'm setting it to download right now. I'll let you know if it's a good one as I'm digging into this month's upcoming Nindies We Love video, and, well, it'll be in there, of course, if I end up loving it. So, you know those puzzles that are in almost every Zelda and other top-down action game where you slide boxes around to open doors or drop treasures or just help you get from one side of the room to the other? Well, the evil maniacs at Polygon Art have made a game out of that called, wait for it, Push the Crate. And Push the Crate takes place in this beautiful 3D world in an over-the-shoulder 3D perspective. This game is one of the prettier titles I have seen on the Switch, especially for indie games. And the whole goal is just to transport crates from one side of the level to the other. But this entirely new perspective on that classic video game trope has me genuinely intrigued. It'll only cost $7.99 to push crates to your heart's content, and while there's absolutely zero information on the point or story behind the game, I have to ask you, do we really need to know the purpose behind a game called Push the Crate? I don't think so. And finally, our last release for November 14th is a game by Merge Games I've been really excited to talk about and even more excited to get my own hands on. Sparklite carries an art style similar to Moonlighter or Crosscode and is similarly a top-down action RPG consisting of real-time combat and a loot crafting loop that looks very addictive. The team over at Red Blue Games have crafted a beautiful world set to a whimsical soundtrack, and as far as I can tell, they've set themselves up for a great game with Sparklite. As these games go, it really all boils down to how good the traversal and combat feels, and then how well that marries into the loop of crafting new equipment, but we'll just have to see for ourselves when Sparklite launches on November 14th at a slightly discounted price of $21.24. And I don't know about you, but that might be one of our best weeks ever. We've got great action RPGs, a couple unique puzzlers, plenty of twin-stick shooters, and some of the best studio names I've ever heard. What do you think? Who wins the award this week? Little Chicken Game Company? Squatting Penguins? Giant Margarita? Let me know on Twitter at Nindie Nation. And with this week's new releases out of the way, it is time to dive into the sales. And with 379 Nindies currently on sale, with 117 of those new this week, here are Nindie Nation's picks for the best sales of this week. 99 Vidas is one of my favorite arcade brawlers and a great time to play with friends if you remember pumping quarters into games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or The Simpsons or X-Men, or if you're a fan of the classics like Golden Axe or Streets of Rage. The Switch version is the best version with a bunch of extra content and is currently half off for $4.99, and that is an awesome deal. This game is great. Go check out 99 Vidas. Escape Dudeland is a fun 2D tough-as-nails platformer with a really grotesque sense of humor, and it's currently 99 cents, and it's a good price for that game. Graceful Explosion Machine is probably my longest-running game that I keep going back to on the Switch, and one of my favorite arcade twin-stick shooters. In fact, if you're new to this type of game, start with Graceful Explosion Machine. It's currently 40% off for $7.79. It's beautiful, it's fun, it's approachable, but never gets too easy. I love this game. Go get Graceful Explosion Machine if it's not already on your Switch. And by time this posts, you'll only have a day or two left, but there are 3 great Devolver Digital games currently on sale, I think until November 11th or 12th. Katana Zero is 33% off for $10, Ape Out is half off for $7.49, and the Hotline Miami collection is also half off for $12.49. All 3 of these are great titles in their respective genres that'll give you some serious bang for your buck. No pun intended. Laser Kitty Pow Pow is a ridiculous game that we actually have a Let's Play Nindies of, so check that out. The game is only 29 cents this week, which is like 89 or 98% off. And really, I mean, it's 29 cents. Just check it out. I had a good couple hours of fun with it. Mech Rage is 85% off for $1.49 and is a fun, traditional, top-down twin-stick shooter that I beat in about an hour, but there's still more stuff to do. It'll give you a couple hours of fun for that price. Invisigun Reloaded is a unique top-down action game where everyone is invisible, and it plays kind of like a stealth Bomberman to an extent. It includes a demo, so check it out before you buy, but if you do, it's half off for $9.99. Crypt of the Necrodancer is back on sale for $4, which is a discount of 80%, and is in my personal must-have indies list because other than Nintendo's own published Zelda sequel, there's nothing else like Crypt of the Necrodancer. Old School Musical is a really fun rhythm game that I can only compare to the DS entry Elite Beat Agents. But if that game rings a bell for you, Old School Musical takes you through basically a generalized version of the entire history of video games. You've got to see it for yourself, but if you like music-based games, you can't miss Old School Musical. It's currently half off for $6.49. And if you're in the mood for a fast-paced action game, both of the Bleed titles, 1 and 2, are on sale for 70% off, which comes out to $359 and $449 respectively. They're kind of like a Ninja Gaiden or maybe even like a 2D Bayonetta. Startide, which was recently on our We Love Nindies video last month, is currently 90% off for only 99 cents, and as I said in the video, it's not the best shmup you can find on the Switch. It's not even close, actually, but for 99 cents, it's a good time and worth the price. And finally, The Walking Vegetables is a great twin-stick roguelike with runs that can easily last an hour or more, and it's currently 80% off for only $2.59. And that brings us to the end of another week of Nindie Nation. As always, check out the video version of this and every episode over on the Nindie Nation YouTube channel, where you can also find Let's Plays and other videos dedicated to the indie games for Nintendo Switch. And keep the Nindie love flowing with us on Facebook or Twitter at Nindie Nation. This week, I asked you on Twitter if you had any questions to consider as I'm debating having a little bit more back and forth with the community on the show. And we did get one question that I wanted to read because I know that this has been a topic of conversation recently. I want to say thank you to Hypecaster for submitting the question, how will the next-gen Xbox and PlayStation affect Nindies? Do you think devs will gravitate toward or away from Nintendo? In the past, the big threes have had promotions for being the best place for indies. I'm of a few thoughts here. With the Xbox 360, Microsoft really relied on indie games to carry them through their first summer, which they called the Xbox Summer of Arcade. And we similarly saw Sony do that with the PlayStation 4's launch, leaning really heavily on indies for the first year and a half of that system's existence. And now at PlayStation, they have a renewed interest, it seems, with Shuhei Yoshida, the former president of their worldwide first-party studios, taking up the role of helping to cultivate indie relations. As we all know, for most of this generation, and since the Switch has been available, it's been all about the Nindies and Nintendo carrying the torch for indie games. Now we've got Xbox Game Pass, and there's a lot of great indies that Microsoft gives a lot of exposure to on their own platform, and I suspect that they'll continue to do that in the next generation. So I think no matter what happens, Microsoft kind of ends up in the middle because they'll have a lot, but it's not going to drive a ton of new business. But I think the people that have Game Pass will really appreciate having access to all of the indie games that you can already get on the subscription service. And with PlayStation, as their first-party titles kind of ebb and flow, I would think that their push for indie games on the PlayStation 5 would kind of follow the opposite pattern, trying to fill in some of those gaps. What the Switch brings to the table is a system that's easy to develop for, with familiar architecture and hardware that isn't too demanding. And I know many of us, myself included, love playing smaller games like Nindies on the go, and that's what makes the Switch such a perfect fit. Time will tell if we see Sony push like they have in the past, and it'll be really interesting to see how Nintendo does their Nindie-focused directs, if we'll see Sony adopt any of that into their own state of play videos they've been doing. But I do think Nintendo will continue to promote the indies very heavily and will rely on them, especially as they transition into whatever comes after the Switch in a couple of years. We're seeing Nindies continue to sell, break records, and get a ton of new exposure to gamers from all platforms coming to the Switch because of Nindies. So I think we're going to see it pretty strong on the Switch and with the Nintendo platform, at least for the next few years. But what do all of you think? Will Nintendo carry the indie crown next generation? Or will the torch be passed around yet again? Look for the thread over on Twitter at Nindie Nation, and we'll see if we get a few responses to share next week. Thanks, Hypecaster, for submitting that question. And for all other things Nintendo related, head on over to thenintendovillage.com to read the team's daily feature articles, previews, reviews, and check out all of their upcoming Best of the Year articles, alongside more weekly podcasts just like Nindie Nation, including the Nintendo Village podcast and Nintendo Nostalgia. Thank you so much for listening this week. Feel free to send questions over, and we'll see about trying to add in some more community involvement in next week's episode and try it out for a couple of weeks, see how it goes. Until then, I'm Jeff. This has been Nindie Nation episode 45, your one-stop shop for everything independently developed for the Nintendo Switch. We'll see you next week for episode 46, and whether you're twin-stick shooting, puzzle platforming, or pointing and clicking your way through the week, I hope Nindie Nation has helped you find the perfect game to keep your Joy-Cons synced.